Rebecca Hart did not expect her final practicum rotation to change the course of her life. But that was exactly what happened the morning she walked into the small rural clinic tucked deep in the hills of northern Wyoming. She had been sent there for 6 weeks, an assignment meant to expose medical students to underserved communities. Instead, it exposed her to Daniel Brooks. Daniel was already a patient when she arrived, sitting on the edge of an exam table, pale but smiling as though the effort cost him something he refused to admit. He was 28, though his chronic genetic condition made him look both older and younger at the same time. Older in the weariness of his eyes, younger in the softness of his features. Rebecca was trained to notice signs of illness, but what she noticed first was how his gaze steadied when he looked at her, quiet yet certain, as if he recognized her before she introduced herself. Their connection formed quickly, too quickly for logic to intervene. Rebecca had always been rational, disciplined, the kind of student who turned down weekend plans to review cardiology lectures. Yet with Daniel, she found herself staying after her shift, lingering in doorways, walking with him out to the dirt road where his grandmother picked him up in her aging pickup truck. She knew his condition, severe, unpredictable, the kind that demanded lifelong monitoring. But she also knew with frightening clarity that she had never felt this way about anyone. By the end of 3 weeks, she stopped trying to deny it. Daniel felt like home. When her rotation ended, she delayed her return by a day, then 2, then a week. By the time she finally boarded a bus back to Cheyenne, she already knew she would return to the rural community. She just needed to tell her father. Rebecca walked into her childhood home with her heart beating loud enough to feel in her throat. The house was immaculate, polished marble floors and cold elegance. Her father's pride as much as his reputation. Charles Hart was a well-known corporate attorney, respected and feared in equal measure. He had paid for her schooling, her apartment, her entire life, and he expected, as always, full compliance. He was waiting for her in the sitting room, leather chair angled like a throne. "You look tired," he said without warmth. "I hope this little adventure of yours is over." Rebecca sat across from him. "I met someone." He stiffened. "A man from that town." "His name is Daniel," she said evenly. "We're in love." The silence that followed was not quiet. It was heavy, gathering pressure like a storm. Her father's jaw tightened. "Rebecca, be serious. You're a medical student. He is, what exactly? A man with no career, no future, and an illness that could take him any year, any month." "He is kind," she said. "He makes me feel alive. And he loves me." "You're 24, Charles snapped. "You don't know the first thing about love. You grew up in comfort, in stability. And now you want to throw your life away for someone who cannot give you anything." Rebecca swallowed hard. "I don't need him to give me anything. I want him." Her father stood abruptly. "Absolutely not. I will not allow this." She looked up at him. "You can't stop me." The words seemed to wound him more deeply than they should have. "Rebecca," he said, voice colder now, "if you pursue this, if you marry him, if you move out there, you will do so alone. Do you understand me?" Her throat burned. "Are you saying you'll cut me off?" "I am saying," he answered, "that if you choose him, you are no longer my daughter." For a moment, she could not breathe. But when she finally spoke, her voice was steady. "Then I choose him." Her father turned away, already shutting down any chance of reconciliation. Rebecca walked upstairs to pack her suitcase, every step heavier than the last. At the window, she could see the city where she'd grown up, clean, structured, predictable. It had been her whole life. But Daniel was her future. She zipped her suitcase shut, wiped her eyes, and whispered to herself, "I'll go back to him. Whatever comes next, we'll face it together." And with that, she left the house that had never really felt like home. The wedding was small, intimate in a way Rebecca never expected, quiet but full of sincerity. It took place in the community hall of Willow Creek, the rural town where Daniel had been raised and where generations of his family had lived before him. Lace curtains fluttered in the warm Idaho breeze as neighbors brought homemade pies and wildflowers instead of elaborate gifts. Though modest, it was the kind of celebration where people looked one another in the eyes, where every handshake was genuine. Daniel's grandmother, Margaret, stood at the steps of her home waiting for them when the ceremony ended. She was tiny, her back slightly bent with age, but the strength of her spirit filled the entire yard. When she saw Rebecca, her eyes watered instantly. "Oh, honey," Margaret whispered as she pulled Rebecca into a trembling embrace. "I've prayed for years that Daniel would find someone who truly saw him." It stunned Rebecca to feel such immediate warmth, no hesitation, no judgment. Margaret didn't congratulate them on the wedding first. She thanked Rebecca for loving her grandson, and as strange as it felt, Rebecca realized she needed that welcome more than she knew. They settled into Daniel's childhood home, a small one-story house with a slanted porch and creaking floorboards. Right next to it stood the grandmother's cottage, the two properties practically touching. In the mornings, the scent of Margaret's fresh bread drifted through the windows, and in the evenings she'd stop by with herbal teas insisting they'd drive away bad spirits. Rebecca's days quickly became busier than she had ever expected. Willow Creek had not had a proper medical professional in 2 years. When the former nurse practitioner retired and the clinic closed, residents resorted to traveling nearly an hour to the nearest urgent care. So when word spread that Daniel's bride was a medical student with hands steady enough to stitch wounds and a heart patient enough to listen, the whole town reacted instantly. The clinic building itself was a forgotten relic, paint peeling from its wooden siding, a cracked window, and a warped front porch railing. Inside, dust coated every surface, a rusted exam table sat crookedly in the corner, and medical tools were scattered in mismatched drawers as if the previous practitioner had left in a hurry. Rebecca stood in the doorway on her first day, rolled up her sleeves and whispered, "Okay, we can fix this." She barely had time to pick up a broom before neighbors started arriving. A woman from the general store brought buckets and rags. A retired carpenter hobbled in with a toolbox. Teenagers from the local high school hauled old furniture out to the curb. Within hours, the entire clinic buzzed with life. Each person determined to help their new doctor, as they affectionately called her, even though she corrected them again and again, reminding them she wasn't licensed yet. They waved her comments away. To them, honesty mattered more than titles. Daniel watched all of this with quiet pride. His own health prevented him from doing heavier physical work, but the town council offered him a part-time administrative role, organizing paperwork, helping elderly residents file requests, and acting as a liaison between the community and local services. It wasn't demanding, and that was precisely what made it possible for him. In the evenings, Rebecca came home covered in dust or paint, still buzzing with energy after tending to sprained ankles. Coughs and the endless stream of blood pressure checks the elderly insisted on. Daniel would meet her at the door, teasing her about working harder than the entire hospital staff she left behind. But she didn't mind. For the first time, Rebecca felt needed, not just as a daughter or a student, but as a person with purpose. The days were simple, predictable, but they were filled with genuine gratitude, something she'd rarely experienced in the city. For almost the first time in her life, she found herself believing that maybe she and Daniel had chosen correctly, that love, even in a place so unfamiliar, could build a life worth staying for. The clinic reopened on a cool Monday morning, its freshly painted walls still carrying the faint scent of new lumber and disinfectant. Rebecca stood inside in a crisp white medical coat, fingers lightly pressed against her clipboard as she waited for her first patient. She had imagined a quiet start maybe one or two people trickling in out of curiosity. But when she stepped outside to unlock the door, she froze. A crowd had already gathered. Elderly women in quilted jackets, men in worn work boots, teenagers with scraped knees. People of every age were lined up along the porch and down the walkway. Some leaned on canes, some whispered excitedly, and others simply stood there with hopeful expressions she had never seen in her years of city clinical rotations. The moment she opened the door, the group surged forward, not chaotically, but with years of pent-up need. Her first patient was Mr. Harris, a local grandfather with a deep lead splinter buried in his finger. He apologized repeatedly for bothering her on opening day, even as he winced from the infection. Rebecca gently stabilized his hand, numbed the area, and removed the splinter with practiced precision. When she wrapped his bandage, he looked at her with misty eyes and whispered, "You've got golden hands. Document." The word startled her, not because of the compliment, but because of the sincerity behind them. It became a phrase she would hear again and again. Next came a farmer with untreated high blood pressure, followed by a woman with an old ankle injury that had never healed properly. Then a young mother with a feverish toddler. Then a retired mechanic who only wanted someone to listen, as he described a dull chest ache that had frightened him for months. By midday, the waiting room was full, and Daniel stopped by on his way to his part-time town office job, just to check on her. He leaned against the doorframe, smiling softly as he watched her move from patient to patient, her voice calm, her hands steady, her focus unwavering. "This is your place," he said quietly as she washed her hands between patients. "I've never seen you shine like this." She felt the warmth of his pride settle somewhere deep in her chest. Even as she returned his smile, she could see his exhaustion, how the short walk from the office to the clinic had made him catch his breath, how he was trying to hide the tremor in his fingers. Fear tightened inside her, but she tucked it away. For now, he was here. For now, he was smiling at her. That was enough. The afternoon brought more complex cases. An elderly woman with dangerously high blood sugar, a teenager with a badly infected scrape from a rusty nail, and a local grandfather whose hand had swelled from a week-old splinter that had turned into an abscess. Rebecca performed a small incision and drainage procedure right there in the clinic. The old man gripped her wrist afterward and murmured, "Golden hands, sweetheart. Truly golden." Word spread fast. By the second day, people from the next two villages over began to show up. Rebecca never turned anyone away. She skipped lunch, worked late, and still felt she was barely keeping up with the need. The townspeople responded in their own quiet ways, dropping off loaves of warm bread, jars of jam, knitted baby hats for future use, and baskets of apples and peaches. In the evenings, she and Daniel would sit in their small kitchen, sharing food the townspeople had left on their porch. She would talk about the cases she'd handled, the people she'd met, the stories they'd shared. Daniel listened with full attention, eyes glowing with admiration and something else, something softer, more fragile. He loved her happiness, but she could see the shadow behind his smile, the fear that he might not be around long enough to be part of her future. One night, as she massaged his tired hands, he whispered, "I'm proud of you, Rebecca. So proud." His voice cracked, not with pain, but with hope. She squeezed his fingers gently. "We're in this together," she said. "We always will be." And for the first time since moving to the rural valley, she felt truly at home, not because of the clinic she built, but because of the community that embraced her and the man who believed in her with his whole heart. Rebecca felt the first suspicion of pregnancy on an early spring morning, when the clinic was still cool and the windows fogged from her boiling kettle. The thought hit her like a soft, impossible whisper. She stepped into the tiny bathroom, holding her breath as if the air itself might break the moment. When the test turned positive, she pressed both hands over her mouth, her eyes filling with tears. For the first time since moving to the village, She didn't walk, she ran home. Daniel was at the small wooden table sorting the chairman's paperwork when she burst through the door, breathless, glowing, trembling. "Daniel!" she whispered, the word barely holding the joy inside her. "We're having a baby!" For a moment, Daniel simply stared at her. His expression tightened, not with anger, but fear so deep it hollowed his features. He pushed the papers aside with shaking hands. "Rebecca, are you sure?" His voice cracked, almost pleading for another explanation. She nodded, laughing through her tears. But Daniel's face didn't soften. He rose slowly, pacing, pressing the heel of his hand to his forehead. "My illness," he said. "You know what it is. What if what if they inherit it? What if they end up like me? What kind of life? What if I leave you both alone?" Rebecca grabbed his hands, holding them to her chest. "No one knows anything yet, and whatever happens, we'll face it together." She meant every word, but Daniel's panic lingered, tightening around the edges of his joy. It took days, quiet talks, long nights, hesitant touches for Daniel to let himself imagine being a father. When he finally rested his head against her stomach and whispered, "Hey, little one," Rebecca felt her entire world settle into place. Daniel was scared, yes, but he was also hopeful, and that hope made him glow in a way she had never seen. Weeks passed. Rebecca's belly was still flat, but she felt full, complete. Even the village seemed lighter, as if sharing her secret happiness. When it came time for her scheduled prenatal checkup, Daniel couldn't go. He had work at the administration office, so his grandmother packed her sandwiches and hugged her tightly before she boarded the bus. The trip to the city felt routine, almost peaceful. The doctor conducted the exam, noted her progress, and wished her well. Everything seemed normal. Rebecca hummed softly to herself as she walked to the bus station, imagining Daniel's expression when she told him the doctor thought the baby might be a girl. She pictured him placing both hands over her belly, that shy half-smile he always tried to hide. By the time the bus rolled back into the village, the sun was fading. Rebecca stepped off, already seeing their home in her mind. The warm lamp, Daniel waiting in the doorway, that familiar scent of old wood and herbs. But she didn't expect the crowd. A cluster of neighbors stood gathered in front of her house. Their silhouettes were stiff, unmoving. The air felt wrong, too still, too heavy. Rebecca froze where she stood. Then someone from the group turned, saw her, and their face crumpled. "Rebecca, dear God!" But the rest of the sentence never reached her. She pushed through the crowd, the world dissolving into noise and blood rushing in her ears. Her hands fumbled at the door. It was open. Inside, the house was quiet, too quiet. Daniel lay on the couch, his face peaceful, almost smiling. His hands were folded over his stomach. His chest was still. He wasn't sleeping. Rebecca let out a sound that wasn't a scream and wasn't a breath, something primal, ripped from the center of her existence. She stumbled toward him, dropping to her knees, shaking him, calling his name over and over until her voice shredded. The pain hit her belly like a blade, a tearing, crushing agony. Someone grabbed her from behind as she collapsed, pulling her away from Daniel's body. The room blurred, voices turning into distant echoes. Someone shouted to get the car. Someone else tried to steady her head. She didn't feel herself being lifted. She didn't feel the road beneath them. She only felt the empty space inside her, not just where Daniel had been, but where the tiny life inside her had fluttered hours before. The hospital lights were harsh and white. Doctors spoke in urgent tones. Rebecca drifted in and out, catching fragments, hemorrhaging, trauma, stabilize her, pregnancy, lost. Her daughter, their daughter, was gone. And Rebecca, once full of light and hope, sank into the deepest darkness her story would ever hold. Rebecca remained in the hospital long after the doctors said she was medically stable. Her body had survived, but everything else in her seemed to have collapsed. She lay on her side, facing the window, refusing food, refusing water, refusing to speak. Nurses tried coaxing words out of her, but she barely blinked. The world had become a muted blur, stripped of Daniel's warmth and the future she had imagined for their daughter. Sometimes a nurse would fix her blankets or adjust her floor, and Rebecca wouldn't even react. Other times she would be found silently crying, tears soaking into the pillow without a sound escaping her. The grief was so heavy it felt like gravity itself was pulling her down, and there was no strength left to resist. Eventually, the attending physician, who had watched her deterioration with growing frustration, lost his gentle patience. One morning he stood beside her bed and spoke firmly, almost sternly. "Rebecca, this cannot continue. Your body is already weakened. If you don't start eating, your organs will shut down. You know this better than most. You are a doctor. You understand exactly what you're doing to yourself." At first, she didn't move, didn't blink, didn't show the slightest hint that she'd hurt him. But then, as if something cracked deep inside her, a tiny tremor ran across her face. Her breath hitched once, barely audible, and the dam finally broke. Rebecca burst into sobs, so violent the nurses had to steady her shoulders. It was the first sound she'd made since losing Daniel. They gave her a mild sedative to calm her, and for the first time, she slept without nightmares. It was the beginning of a fragile, uncertain recovery. That evening, as the light in the hallway dimmed for the night shift, her hospital room door creaked open softly. Rebecca didn't turn. She assumed it was a nurse. But then she heard a voice she hadn't heard in years, thick with emotion and age. "Becca, sweetheart." She froze. Slowly, painfully, she rolled onto her back. Her father stood in the doorway, her stern, authoritative, distant father, looking older than she remembered. His shoulders sagged. His eyes were rimmed red. She whispered, voice barely functioning, "Dad?" He stepped toward her as if approaching a wounded child, not the grown woman he had pushed away. "Why didn't you call me?" he asked, voice breaking. "Why didn't you tell me what was happening?" Rebecca blinked back tears. "I didn't think you'd come." Her father sat carefully on the edge of her bed. "I deserved that. I know I did." He rubbed his face with both hands, as if ashamed to show emotion. "I was wrong about him, about everything. And now I'm too late." They talked for a long time, about Daniel, about the baby, about the life she lost, about the years they spent estranged, each too proud or too frightened to bridge the gap. Her father admitted things Rebecca never thought she would hear, that he had lived with regret every day since she left, that he had reread her farewell letter more times than he could count, that he never stopped worrying about her. When he finally asked her to come home, his voice was gentle, almost pleading. "You don't have to stay out here anymore, sweetheart. There's nothing left tying you to this pain. Come back to the city. Let me take care of you." Rebecca closed her eyes, gathering strength. She thought of Daniel's grandmother, now nearly 90, of the elderly patients waiting for someone to check their blood pressure, listen to their worries, or simply sit with them, of the tiny village clinic she had helped rebuild with her own hands. When she answered, her voice was soft but steady. "I can't leave them, Dad. They need me, and I need to be where Daniel lived, where he loved me, where people count on me." Her father didn't argue. He didn't raise his voice. Instead, he nodded slowly, as if accepting a truth he could no longer fight. He took her hand in his. "If you ever need help, if life ever becomes too heavy, you must promise me you'll come to me. No pride, no fear, just come." Rebecca squeezed his hand weakly. "I promise." And for the first time since the tragedy, she felt the faintest flicker of something she thought she had lost forever. Not happiness, not hope, but the willingness to continue breathing, Life in the rural community eased back into its slow rhythm. But for Rebecca, every day felt like walking through a memory. When she returned from the hospital months earlier, the house still smelled faintly of Daniel's cologne, still held the warmth of the life they were supposed to build together. She slept on his side of the bed for weeks, pressing her face into the pillow as if the trace of him would somehow hold her together. Daniel's grandmother, who had welcomed her like her own granddaughter from day one, became Rebecca's last living connection to him. The elderly woman tried to stay strong for her, cooking simple meals, telling stories in the evenings, pretending not to notice when Rebecca would suddenly go silent and stare at Daniel's worn jacket hanging by the door. But age was cruel, and grief even more so. One chilly autumn morning, the old woman simply didn't wake up. Rebecca sat beside her for hours, holding the frail hand that had once squeezed hers so warmly. With her passing, an entire branch of Rebecca's heart seemed to wither. Now there was no one left, not in this house, not in this world, who remembered Daniel the way she did. The funeral was small, simple. A handful of villagers stood with lowered heads, whispering prayers into the crisp air. Someone placed a knitted shawl, the grandmother's favorite, over the wooden cross. When the last handful of dirt fell, Rebecca felt something inside her settle. Not in peace, not in acceptance, but in quiet resignation. She was alone now, truly alone. From then on, Rebecca lived almost mechanically. She opened the clinic every morning at 8 sharp. She cleaned, sterilized instruments, organized supplies, tasks that kept her hands moving even when her mind drifted into painful corners. Patients came with their familiar aches, sprains, and chronic worries. She treated them all with the same calm attention, the same gentle precision. They relied on her, and that duty kept her breathing. In the evenings, she walked home on the same dirt road she once walked with Daniel, arm in arm. She still paused at the birch trees where he had carved their initials, the bark now healing over the lines as if trying to forget what had been written. She couldn't forget, not even for a day. Villagers watched her with a mixture of gratitude and worry. They spoke of her quietly at the store, at the wells, in the gardens. "She's fading," one grandmother murmured. "She's too young to live like this," another whispered. But no one knew how to help a woman carrying sorrow like a second skin. The new village boss, formerly the assistant to the old chairman, took particular notice. He saw how Rebecca moved through her routine without spark, how she rarely laughed anymore, how exhaustion shadowed her eyes. One afternoon, after she had finished stitching up a boy's cut hand, he lingered by the clinic door. "Rebecca," he said gently, folding his cap in his hands, "you've been working non-stop. No vacations, no rest days, not even holidays." She tried to smile. "The town needs me. Someone always shows up with something." "That's just it," he replied, "because they know you're always here. You never give yourself a moment. You deserve one." She shook her head. "I wouldn't know what to do with time off." He exhaled, frustrated, not with her, but with the weight she refused to set down. "Even machines break if they don't rest," he said quietly. "You're human, Rebecca, and you've been carrying too much for too long." She looked down at her hands, steady, capable, but tired, so very tired. "Take a vacation," he urged. "Just a week or two. Go to the city, visit family, clear your head. We'll make sure the clinic stays covered. The villagers care about you. We're worried." No one had said it so plainly before. For a moment, Rebecca felt something unfamiliar flicker in her chest. Maybe fear, maybe relief, maybe the faintest spark of wanting more than survival. She didn't give him an answer that day, but on her walk home, as the sun dipped behind the hills and the air turned cool, she wondered, quietly, cautiously, if stepping away might not be running from the past, but making space for any future at all. The morning sun drifted between the thin curtains of Rebecca's small farmhouse, touching the table where she had fallen asleep, reviewing patient notes again. Life in Pine Hollow had settled into a rhythm so predictable it almost felt like a ritual, one she never questioned, one that kept her from feeling the weight she carried inside. She rose early, made tea, checked her supply cabinet, and walked to the clinic as if on autopilot. Daniel had been gone for years, but the path their feet once shared remained the same. By late afternoon, the clinic had finally quieted. Rebecca was sanitizing instruments when the door flew open without a knock, because only one person in the village ever ignored the concept of knocking. "Rebecca, you didn't think you'd get away with it, did you?" Olivia burst in, cheeks flushed from the cold, arms full of grocery bags and a bakery box. Rebecca blinked. "Get away with what?" Olivia gave her a look so dramatic it belonged on a stage. "Your birthday, today, which you conveniently forgot again." Rebecca froze. She truly had forgotten. Not intentionally. Her days just blended together. One long, quiet stretch of work, silence, and obligations. She reached for a protest, but Olivia raised a hand sharply. "Don't even try. I already recruited people." And Grisha marinated enough chicken to feed an army. Olivia marched to the counter and slammed the bags down with purpose. "So yes, sweetheart, we're celebrating. Not for you. Well, actually for you, but also because we're tired of watching you fade into your work like some kind of ghost doctor." Rebecca sighed, a soft, tired sound. "Leave. I really don't want to party." "Good," Olivia said, ignoring her, "because it's not a party. It's a small dinner with friends who love you and who are worried about you." Rebecca looked down at the counter, her throat tightening. She didn't have the strength to argue, not against Olivia and not against the truth. Later that evening, their living room buzzed with warm voices. Villagers filled the space with casseroles, gifts wrapped in newspaper, and the kind of laughter only heard among people who've known each other for decades. Even the village boss, Vasily, showed up, awkwardly holding a potted plant as if he had been forced to buy it. When the cake came out, Olivia dimmed the lights. "Make a wish," she whispered. Rebecca didn't. She simply closed her eyes for a few seconds. A pause, a breath. And for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel entirely hollow. After the guests left and the silence returned, Vasily lingered near the door, clearing his throat. "Rebecca, I've been thinking. You haven't had a real break in years, and we all see how hard you've been working." She shook her head immediately. "I can't leave the clinic." "That's exactly why I'm telling you this now," he said. "I've arranged for a temporary assistant, Tatiana Gray, a good nurse. She'll arrive next week, work a full week with you, then take over while you, well, go somewhere. Anywhere." Rebecca stared at him, stunned. "Vasily, I didn't ask for—" "Yeah, that's the problem," he interrupted. "You never ask for anything. And we're all done watching you burn yourself out." His voice softened. "You deserve a life, Rebecca, even if it's just a little rest." Olivia nodded, firmly behind him. "He's right, and don't even try to argue. You can't scare me. I've survived childbirth, a tornado, and my husband's cooking." Rebecca's resistance collapsed. She managed a faint smile. "Fine, I'll take a short trip. Just a few days." "Good," Vasily said. "That's settled." That night, after everyone had gone, Rebecca sat alone at her table. She finally allowed herself to think about it, returning to her father's home for a few days, then visiting Daniel's grandmother's old abandoned cottage. It needed repairs, and she'd always meant to clean it up. Maybe starting there would help her feel grounded, maybe even ready for the next chapter she hadn't yet admitted she needed. But as she prepared for bed, the village's unnatural stillness unsettled her. It was nearly midnight, and Pine Hollow was usually silent. Yet tonight she heard it, cars, several of them, engines humming as they moved slowly down the narrow main road. Unusual, out of place. She watched from the window as headlights drifted through the mist, then disappeared beyond the hill. A faint unease settled in her chest. She didn't know it yet, but the next morning, everything would change. The morning Rebecca planned to leave for her father's home began with an odd kind of stillness. Too still, even for their quiet rural town, tucked along the edge of the Pennsylvania woods. She woke earlier than usual, long before the driver was scheduled to arrive. The house felt cold, as though something had slipped through it during the night. She made tea, paced the small kitchen, then finally stepped outside, hoping fresh air would settle the restless feeling in her chest. Dawn was still breaking, a pale ribbon of light stretching across the treetops. The grass was damp, the air sharp with the smell of earth and apples from the old orchard Daniel once tended. Rebecca tightened her sweater and took a few steps toward the backyard, planning to check the fallen fence panel near the birches before calling Olivia to return some borrowed tools. She had barely reached the trees when she froze. A sound drifted through the silence, not loud, not even clear at first. A faint whimper, a tremble of breath. She blinked, stepping closer. Perhaps a stray kitten, she thought. Or maybe her mind was playing tricks on her again. After losing Daniel and the baby, phantom cries had haunted her for months. But then the sound came again, higher, sharper, unmistakably real. A baby. Rebecca's pulse jumped. She pushed through the grass, heart pounding. And there, at the base of one of the largest birch trees, wrapped tightly in a pale blanket, lay an infant. A little girl, eyes wide open, the soft blue of a morning sky, staring directly at her. For a moment, Rebecca couldn't breathe. Her knees hit the ground before she realized she'd fallen. "Oh my God, sweetheart, who left you here?" she whispered, reaching trembling hands forward. The baby gave a small, desperate cry, hungry, cold, confused. Instinct overrode shock. Rebecca scooped the child into her arms, pulling the blanket tighter around her tiny body. The baby's cheek pressed against her shoulder, warm and fragile and impossibly alive. She ran back to the house. Inside, she unwrapped the blanket, checking for injuries. The infant was clean, healthy-looking, just desperately hungry. As Rebecca adjusted the blanket again, something slipped from between the folds, a small folded piece of paper. Her hands shook as she opened it. "Please help her. I'm gone." That was it. No name. No explanation. Just 6 words that sliced straight through her. Rebecca stared at the note as if it might reveal more if she looked long enough. But the meaning was painfully clear. The mother wasn't coming back. Whether she was dead or running or hiding, Rebecca didn't know. The child whimpered again. Yes, I'm here," Rebecca murmured, stroking her soft cheek. She grabbed her phone and called Olivia. Olivia arrived, breathless, still in her canvas store apron. The moment she saw the baby, she stopped short. "Rebecca! Holy, where did? In the orchard, under the birches. Someone left her there." Olivia pressed a hand to her mouth. "Dear God, she's newborn, maybe a month old. She needs food, formula, anything." Rebecca heated water, while Olivia ran to her own house to grab an emergency bottle and formula she kept for her nephew. Within minutes, they had managed to warm a small bottle, and Rebecca held it as the baby latched desperately, drinking like her life depended on it. They sat in silence for a while, Rebecca cradling the child, Olivia staring in disbelief. "What are you going to do?" Olivia finally whispered. Rebecca stared down at the tiny girl, a swirl of fear and tenderness tightening in her chest. "If I call the sheriff's office, they'll take her straight into foster care, maybe across the state. She'll disappear into the system before we even know her name." Olivia nodded grimly. Everyone in the village knew how overwhelmed the county was. Babies were often sent 2 or 3 counties away. Rebecca exhaled shakily. "I'm supposed to go to my father's today anyway." He has connections, influence, the kind that can help me fight for custody. He can help me make her legally mine. Olivia met her eyes. Rebecca, are you sure? No, she admitted softly. But I know one thing. I'm not letting her go to strangers. Not after someone trusted me enough to leave her at my doorstep. She held the baby closer, and in that moment, fragile, unprepared, terrified, Rebecca knew her life had just changed again, irrevocably. Rebecca's father, Richard Collins, stood frozen when she walked into his home office in Des Moines with a baby bundled tightly in her arms. The morning sunlight hit his face just right, revealing a mix of confusion, fear, and something else, an emotion Rebecca hadn't seen in him for years: vulnerability. For a man who once controlled boardrooms and commanded respect with a single raised brow, this was the closest he had ever looked to lost. When she finished explaining what happened, the abandoned newborn, the note, the crying in the trees, Richard finally exhaled. Rebecca, you should have told me sooner. His voice was quieter than she expected. She braced for criticism, for the same old arguments about responsibility and practicality. Instead, he stepped closer and gently lifted the blanket from the baby's face. His expression softened in an instant. You once asked me to help when you needed it, he said. I made a promise. I'm keeping it. He didn't offer money. He didn't offer advice. He picked up his phone. By noon, Richard had arranged an emergency meeting with a family law attorney he trusted in Iowa. The legal path for an abandoned infant was strict. Mandatory notification to the Department of Human Services, placement into temporary state custody, foster placement, then potential adoption if no biological family came forward. But there were exceptions, rare, complicated, dependent on circumstances, but possible. Rebecca watched him advocate for her with a determination she had not seen since the days before their estrangement. He argued for emergency guardianship, presenting Rebecca's medical background, stable housing, and clean record. The attorney agreed to file the paperwork immediately. The plan was clear. Rebecca would become Sophie's emergency guardian, then foster parent, then, if no biological claim was made, her adoptive mother. It won't be fast, Richard warned her gently as they left the attorney's office. And it won't be easy, but we'll do it the right way. Rebecca glanced down at the baby sleeping on her chest. Her name is Sophie, she whispered. I think that's her name. Richard's eyes softened again. Then let's make sure Sophie stays with you. For the next week, Rebecca stayed in Des Moines while the guardianship was formalized. Richard transformed unexpectedly into a grandfather, hovering over the crib, learning how to mix formula, even pacing the living room at 3 a.m. with Sophie resting against his shoulder. He didn't say it aloud, but Rebecca knew this child was healing something inside him that had been broken for years. When Rebecca finally returned to the village with Sophie, every porch light flickered on. This was a place where news traveled faster than wind across the fields. Olivia met her at the gate, arms crossed, one eyebrow raised in theatrical judgment. So, she said, this is our new secret? Rebecca sighed. We have to protect her. Olivia nodded, lowering her voice. Then, the story is this. You had a sister no one knew about. She died. You took her baby. It was dramatic enough to satisfy the curious and tragic enough to shut down further questions. Within 2 days, the entire village accepted it as truth. Mrs. Thompson from the bakery delivered fresh rolls for the little angel. The retired farmer down the road carved a wooden cradle. Old Mr. Bailey brought knitted blankets because babies get cold easily, even in summer. Life in the village shifted again, quietly, gently, beautifully. Sophie grew impossibly fast. By 6 months, she was toddling around Rebecca's clinic, grabbing stethoscopes, babbling at elderly patients who melted instantly at her smile. Each milestone softened something in Rebecca's chest. Grief lived there still, grief for Daniel. for their unborn daughter. But Sophie's laughter filled cracks Rebecca once thought permanent. Richard visited every month, sometimes more. His expensive tailored suits became rarer. He traded them for flannel shirts and comfortable jeans. He started tending the small garden behind Rebecca's house, claiming it helped his blood pressure. The truth was simpler. He wanted to be near his granddaughter. 2 years later, he sold his company shares, packed up the rest of his belongings, and moved permanently to the village. The man who once believed rural life was beneath his daughter now pushed Sophie's stroller down the dirt path every morning, waving at neighbors like he'd lived there forever. Rebecca sometimes watched them from the clinic doorway, her father and her daughter, two people who shouldn't have become each other's salvation, yet somehow did. Raising Sophie didn't erase Rebecca's pain, but it grew something stronger in its place, a life worth staying for, a family rebuilt in the unlikeliest of places. And slowly, the village that once healed her became the village she healed right back. Rebecca's father settled into the village the way an old tree finally finds the soil it always belonged to. He was no longer the polished, business-focused man who once controlled every room he walked into. Here, he was simply Mr. Collins, the grandfather who carried Sophie on his shoulders as they crossed the footbridge, the man who bought lumber for repairs, amber near the iris. There was no doubt. This man, this stranger who had appeared after 10 long years, might be Sophie's biological father, and he had finally found them